Hey, Paul.
Hey Fab,
How's it going?
very good. You?
Good, good. So today you wanted to talk about sales habits, and from what I understand, less, creating a habit, right? I think it's easy for everybody to say like, "Hey, start doing this," or "I'm going to start making 10 calls a day," or whatever. The challenge, and this obviously goes beyond sales, but we'll keep it within the sales realm, is keeping that habit, right? Like that's the bigger challenge here, right? That's what you wanted to address. And so again, like the goal here at the end of the show would be to hopefully give sales leaders, managers, VPs, co-founders, whoever's managing the sales team,
Owners.
owners, advice on how they can help their sales reps adopt and keep new sales habits.
Yeah,
Correct? Cool.
correct. Yeah, and adopt and keep, but we have to go backwards a little bit to go there.
Yeah. Let's go
Um,
for it. Go backwards.
so, and the reason that anyone, the reason you want your team to have good habits, obviously, is because good habits will bring on the right activities, um, even the right learning, the right, the right attitude to learn and
Yeah.
move forward, and what you need to do to have success.
Right.
Now, if you're an owner, founder, VP, sales manager, and you're saying to your team, okay, these are the habits we want you to do, bang, bang, bang. And then I'm going backwards. I'm going to take a few minutes. And of course, I
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
and you just tell them, well, these are the habits you have to have. They may say yes. And some of them might agree, but they might have a hard time because maybe it's outside of their wheelhouse of what they normally do. So the first thing you need to do, and we've talked about this before, is you need to understand what drives your team.
Yeah.
So, what are their motivations? Why do they work? What is it that? Why do they do this job? Why do they like doing sales? Well, and it sounds like very mushy, but it's important. You need to know your people and what triggers them to want to move forward. The next
Yeah.
thing is they themselves, those people that you're trying to motivate, have to see the connection between the activities, the success they will have in sales, and achieving their personal motivation.
Yeah.
And then as we move forward, is okay, how do you create those habits? Well, creating a habit is sometimes easy. Say, okay, I'll go to the gym or I'll do so many cold calls. But really, to create that habit, you need to, I think you need to do it for 30 or 60 days for it to become a permanent habit. And probably the hardest thing is when you're hiring a senior salesperson who has had success in the past and you're trying to create a new habit, and that can be tough too. So the first thing you need to do is you need to get the buy-in from your sales team on the habits that they need to have to move forward. And then the hard thing, and that's what we really want to talk about, and is how do you maintain those habits? So let's talk about what those habits should be, just as an example. I would say, obviously, prospecting if you're a hunter, um, farming, upselling. So you want to have time in your agenda where you're specifically focusing on those things. So that means for most people it'll be, cold emails. When I say cold, everything's warm now because you have a specific capacity to go research anything on the web. So
Yeah.
what I call cold now is there's been no approach before. So no
Mm.
contact. So whether it's email, calls, LinkedIn, social media, whatever it might be, you need to put time in your agenda to do that. And in my opinion, everything ties back to your agenda. Your calendar as a salesperson, as a sales manager, as anyone in sales, and yes, this I think can work outside the sales field, but you need to have everything specifically in there. So once you have those habits, they should be spread out through your calendar of things that you need to do to have success. So it could be
Mm.
prospecting, it could be follow-ups, it could be upsales, you could be preparing demos, you could be booking meetings in person, but whatever it is that you need to do to have success should all live in your calendar. So that's the first step. When you go to the gym, you put it in your calendar. You go on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Well, it's in your calendar. It's just there. You go. Same thing for
Yeah.
prospecting. So to maintain those habits, to help your team maintain those habits, they have to want to do those habits. And as a manager, let's talk about the sales manager, you have to help them keep on track with those habits. So you
Yeah.
become their accountability partner. So at the beginning of the week, when you have your one on one with them or your sales meeting, you're asking them, how's it going in the habits that you've created and with the results that you're expecting from those habits? And when they're
Yeah.
having a hard time, you're not ramming it down their throat. Hey, you didn't do your calls. You're saying, why didn't you do your calls? You're using that, questions. Hey, that's in our name. You're using those questions to find out why they're not going there. You're digging deeper, like you do with a client. And then you're going to find out, okay, why are these people holding habits and why are they not holding habits? And you're
Mm.
helping them move forward. Most human beings that have habits will, at one point, fall off. You stop going to the gym, you start eating sugar again, whatever it might be. But you have to, as a sales manager in the sales habits, you're helping them get back on track.
Yeah.
One last thing, most salespeople are ADD. Well, most people are a little bit ADD. There's very few people that stick to something and keep doing it and don't need encouragement. And that's what you're doing as a sales manager as
Yeah.
well, is you're encouraging them to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my long-winded intro of 6 minutes and 50 seconds. Sorry, Pat.
That's all right. We're all good. Um, yeah, I don't know where to start with all with all your stuff.
I know you took some notes, so you shoot.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, I think let's take it step by step, right? So, I mean, at this point, it's kind of clear. There's three top reasons why, uh, like people don't stick, and kind of what you can do. So, the first one, obviously, is tying back a new habit to the intrinsic motivation and making sure that it's clear what that new habit, how that new habit will help. And this goes back to like goal setting that we've talked about in the past, and it's like I think you know, I would say like the issue starts even a step further, which is like a lot of goals and objectives that are set are company focused, organization focused, and don't really take into account a rep is like, this is your new sales target, do it. And that's it. And so then it's really hard. And then we could see why at that point, even if a rep is more aware of what needs to get done, it's not intrinsic, right? It's not in line with their motivation. It's not. There's a lot of issues there. So I think, um, I mean, and we can see it all the time, right? Like a big reason why salespeople stop doing what they need to do is that it's not in line with their intrinsic motivation, right? So they do a lot of prospecting in month one because they need to fill their pipeline. Then all of a sudden their pipeline gets filled, and then they stop doing it. And then like if it was in line with their motivation, they would still continue, maybe lower it because they have the less time available to do it, but still continue doing it. And but the part that I like the most is that because that's true, but at the same time, like a lot of I don't know a lot. I think that's a judgment, but salespeople are in sales because they like selling and they like the job to some extent and this and that, and they have ups and downs of their job. What I feel, which I really like what you said, is that you need to make it clear how the habit will contribute to the motivation, right? Or contribute to their goal and motivation. I think that to me is the biggest challenge, more than aligning the habits with intrinsic motivation, because that could be fluffy, right? Like you brought up the example of working out. Some people just want to go work out. They're not quite sure why. It's not that they're unhealthy. It's not that they're necessarily overweight. They just, it's not always clear that it's just something they want to do. But if you help them see what they're doing is helping them progress, that's where the key is, right? So when you work out, even if you don't have a clear, oh, I need to lose, 20 pounds or something, even if the motivation is not clear, if you can still see progression, um, I think that's a big motivator, right? Then that's easier to keep a habit. And I would argue, and that's obviously I'm I'm taking it from an operational point of view, is like it's really important for you to build the reports and the dashboards you need to show them how their new habit is helping them progress. And I think that's happens a bit in a vacuum right now. It's like you need to prospect more, and then they'll look at activity reports, but there's no goal associated to it, right? There's no progression associated to it. So that would be like a number one reason why people don't stick with it, and how a manager can help is like make it clear how that new habit of calling 10 times a day or 10 calls a day or emailing 20 people a day or something like that is helping them progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got to be there. One thing that sales managers don't do a lot is most sales managers are good at accountability. They'll ask you, what
Yeah,
you're up to and whatnot, but they're not always that good at coaching and helping you move forward. Um,
yeah,
and I've seen that a lot where a manager will say, "Well, are you doing your calls?" No, okay, go do your calls, and they don't even listen
yeah,
to the calls.
yeah,
And so there's no partnership there. There's no real understanding of what's going on, and that's a mistake.
yeah,
Um, so to create that habit, you have to be essentially what we're really saying is you've got to be part of that habit. your habit,
yeah,
your habit as a sales
yeah,
manager is to make sure that you're there with them, helping them with their habits, right?
yeah. No, exactly, and that's where um, yeah, I mean, we've all seen it, right? Like, I mean, we bring up working out regularly, or exercising regularly. It's easier to work out when you have somebody that helps you stay accountable, whether that's a trainer or somebody that you go work out with or exercise with. Like, because they'll help you, right? On a day where it's like kind of rainy and anyway, here in Canada, like quite cold or very snowy, it's easy to say like, I'm just going to stay in bed for an extra hour, but if you have somebody waiting for you and expecting you and stuff like that, it makes it a lot harder to cancel
Yeah,
at the last minute. And so then your cancellations become much more valid, right? Like not well or something like that. It's
yeah,
easier to cancel. Your cancellations become valid. So in the same thing there with the habit, the avoiding or not doing something that we said we would do, the reason behind it becomes more and more valid, right? Like, well, I was sick yesterday, so I didn't make my calls, or but if I didn't feel like it or whatever kind of dies out, if your salespeople know that as a manager you're there to help them stay accountable, and again, not in a big boss fashion or big brother fashion, I should say, but more in a partner in this.
yeah. And you touched on something earlier. Well, we both touched on it. Um, if you expect to always feel like doing that habit, if you always expect to be in that motivation state to say, yeah, I'm excited to make my cold calls, or I'm exciting to do these things or those things, uh, it's not going to happen. It's just not true. It's not true that, let's use the exercise thing again. It's not true that every Wednesday and Saturday I wake up thinking, woohoo, I can't wait to go to the gym. I
Yeah,
don't. But what
yeah,
I do know, what I know about motivation and habits is that I've gotten to the habit where I don't really think on Wednesday morning. I just get up, I put my gym clothes on, I'm half asleep. I get in the car and I go to I say the gym, but it's like the circuit training thing. And then I just go do it. And I don't have to
mm,
think. And what I do know is that I rarely, honestly, when I wake up at 7, if someone said, "Hey, do you want to just stay home and we'll have a coffee and talk about the show we watched last night," I'd probably be, yeah, totally feel like doing that. But what happens is what I do know now. What I have realized is that the minute I get to the gym and I start working out, I'm always really happy I went.
yeah,
And I know that in the morning. So if you expect motivation to come on its own, to be like this ethereal thing that just hits you or that is always there, it's not true. Usually motivation comes from action.
yeah,
So, and once you realize that, oh, I really don't feel like doing my cold calls. But then you think back, hey, last time I did the cold calls, I had fun. I met those 2 people and I got hung up 9 times out of 10, but it's okay because I ended up doing 20 calls and I got 2 really good prospects. And I really laughed with one of them because I totally screwed up my intro and it started the thing off and like, okay, it's not so bad. You know what I mean? So, and And what it is that you're kind of sluggish. You may not have done it for a while. You didn't follow your calendars. You're like, oh, I've sort of fallen off the boat. Just get back on the boat. It's okay. It's okay. Just keep doing it. So I don't know. I think I went
Yeah.
all over the place there. There's one concept I wanted to bring in,
I
Fab.
just
So
wanted to touch on what you just said, and I think that's key because I think a lot of times we do say like, "Hey, go prospect or go make more calls or go make more, send more
yeah,
emails," and it's not always easy, right? Especially when we're talking about prospecting. But the same with upselling, cross selling, like which are forms of prospecting, um, or lead to forms of prospecting. But it's helping your team as a manager or leader, helping them find quick wins or enjoyment. I think that's at least in the beginning, right? Because you just mentioned that thing where like when you end up over there, you're happy, right? You're happy you went, but that gets built over time. So I think if you help your team find quick wins or enjoyment, even if it's like, hey, like every morning we're going to prospect as a team, everybody's prospecting at the same time, but before that we'll sit for like 15 minutes, have a coffee, and and making it an enjoyable moment, then it's something to look forward to, right? The team can be like, it's cool, we get to hang out together, and then we'll go, right? Or something to that effect. I think there's that to be said there about, especially in the beginning of forming the new habit, making it finding a easy win or an enjoyable moment. I think that.
well, F- and Fab, you remind me of something. If I can throw in an anecdote there,
Yeah.
if you do make it fun, it makes a big difference. An anecdote in the 1990s. Yes, I'm old. When I
uh,
started in sales, green little salesperson, and what the manager used to do back then, it was really fun. We all sat in this big bull pit, and we would have cold call competitions. So we would sit there for an hour. We'd call as many people as possible, and we'd try to book as many people as possible. We do the whole morning. Actually, we do every 2 weeks. We go from like 9 to 11, or even earlier, from 8:30 to 10:30. And after that, we'd all try to book as many appointments as possible. And then the person who'd book the most appointments would win. And what would we win? Nothing. It was just fun. It was competitive and it was exciting. Or we win a coffee or something really silly, or whatever. The manager bought you lunch or something very simple. But it was a lot of fun. Like we would laugh and we all sat next to each other and we said, "Okay, I'm at 8." Okay. And
yeah.
I remember once I managed to book 10 appointments in 2 hours, and I had won. I was like all proud of myself.
Nice.
Um, and so if you make it fun, it's exciting. But if, let's say, that manager come in and said, "Hey, okay, just do your cold calls, on your own, and tell me how it goes." It's good to do it in a group. It's good to hear each other. I remember I learned a lot. There was this guy who sat in front of me. I still remember his name. I won't say it on the podcast because I don't know if he wants to be mentioned. But he was this guy that had come in from the States, and he was really good at cold calling and had this whole structure. And I knew nothing. I was 24 years old. I knew Fab. I knew nothing. So I would sit there and listen to him, and I'd pick things up. Oh yeah, because he was in the cubicle in front of me,
Right.
and it was fun because you learn from each other. You do it together. So there's a camaraderie. There's a competition. There's a fun, excitement thing. So I love that. Sorry, parentheses
Yeah.
closed. So making habits fun also helps, right? Because every time we did it, no one ever complained. It was always, all right, let's go, let's have fun.
Yeah.
Today.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
and if listen, it was very obvious. The managers wanted us to sell more. Of course, we know
Yeah.
that. We're not stupid. But I'm sorry, we were all on commission. So if we sold more, we made more money. So why would
Right.
we resist this, right?
Yeah. No,
Um,
so that's it. You had a perfect mix of like in line with your motivation and help your sales leader helping you stick with it, right? With buying you lunch or just making an event out of it, and then making it enjoyable, right?
yeah.
And in your case, on top of it, you you got to see progression, right? Because
Yeah.
you went from knowing nothing to all of a sudden having like
Yes.
this person to watch and mentor you indirectly, you know.
Yeah. And I'm extremely competitive.
I knew.
Yeah, I think you went go karting with me once, and you realized that. um, so ultimately, habits.
Mm,
If you're a good sales manager, the last thing I'd like to say about this is, if you're a good sales manager, the habits that your team create help them move forward, and you're there to help them create those habits. There's one last
yeah.
thing I'd like to mention, if you don't mind. Imagine a quadrant. So on one side, you've got important, and on the other side, you've got urgent, right? What happens with a lot of our habits is that they're important, but they're not urgent.
Yeah.
So it's very rare that it's urgent for you to prospect, unless you've got a 1 day closing ratio,
Yeah.
but you've got a long pipeline. It's very rare that it's very important, but often it's not urgent. So often
Yeah.
those habits get pushed aside. So what you need to make sure is that you follow your grid. So whether they're important and urgent or just important and not urgent because they only pay back later down the line, you need to follow your guidelines as to what's going to bring that forward.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's part of it. And you're right. Like if it's usually we prioritize what's urgent because it seems urgent.
Because it is
Um,
urgent,
you
right?
know, or it seems like it
Yeah, or it
sometimes.
seems like it.
But yeah, and exactly. It's just you want to remove some procrastination elements as well, right? Where it's like, oh, this is urgent. Like I need to go see them, because whatever. And so as leader, you have to help, like, yeah, keep the order. Like, okay, let's go see them, but you still have to do this important thing.
Yeah, and just I can't believe I'm doing this for you, but how do you operationalize this? Is that if
Uh,
you have a good CRM and you put these things in correctly, I was just talking to someone this morning. Of course, I use HubSpot. I'm not allowed to use anything else. Um, um, you know, everything that I do is loaded into HubSpot, so I can do it from HubSpot or from my emails or from my phone, and it all goes to one place. Well, it helps me stay in line with my habits. I can go look at I can follow things properly, and it helps me move forward. But you probably
yeah.
have more to say about that makes more sense than what I'm saying. So
No, I mean, ultimately, that's what it boils down to. I think, one thing and I realize I'm maybe a nerd for admitting this, but one thing I enjoy the most in HubSpot is building reports for people, because I find that helps contextualize like what's actually going on.
so much.
Uh, and what I realize is that a lot of reports are put in a vacuum, right? We want a sales activity report, okay, but then when you ask a manager, like, why do you want it? It's not they're not always clear, right?
Yeah,
Well, I should have that, right? Like that's not the exact answer, but that kind of like
yeah.
comes up.
It often boils down to that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and so helping them figure out what to do with the data that you're putting out, right? So in case of the sales leader, having their activity report is being like, okay, and then like setting activity goals and seeing, and so that they can work with their team, and I think that's truly where the magic comes from in a CRM, and that's why it's so important to log your data, and obviously try to automate as much as possible. But that's why I feel it's so important, because it's like, as a leader, then you have the tools you need to go say, like, hey, Paul, you're off your target. What happened here? Like, I got swamped. I'm not busy. Okay, like let's work on that, right? Let's find a
yeah,
solution. Let's and
yeah.
as opposed to just like, hey, here's an activity report that we look at every quarter, and like, hey, Paul did well, and
Well,
there you
and
go. Like,
and you said something I really like, that a lot of it's automated, right? So if you've got a good CRM, it's like, well, you're not doing it twice. You're logging stuff, but you're logging it once and it goes everywhere, and that's great. And I think
yeah,
that helps. So if you've got the good habits and you've got the right tools, well, that just makes everything easier. So if you
yeah,
have the
and
right
that's why,
habits, and it's
yeah, and that's why I feel like the tools are important, right? I mean,
yeah,
they're not. I mean, I can't believe I'll say this. I mean, they're not. The most important is being an active manager and being or leader and being present. Like, like I'm assuming in the '90s you didn't have a sophisticated CRM that logged and tracked all your calls automatically, right? But you were still motivated to do what you had to do. But I think the tools help, right? Because then it's easier also to be proactive. You're not just waiting at the end of the month and being like, oh, what
well,
happened
you
there?
say that, but back then, just before the CRMs became popular, I mean, I think they were starting out there, the early
Yeah,
90s. I'm talking 1990 here. But we had day planners, right? We had the big calendar agendas with your tasks. And essentially, it was what the CRM became, but it was the
yeah,
written version of it. So, yes, we did have tools. They just
you're
were
right.
not digital right away. They became digital a couple of years later. And
Fair
of
enough.
course, that made a huge difference, of course. And
Yeah,
yes, it made a difference. But you're right. we were still selling. We still had the habits. We are still doing the cold calls. We used to have lists, and we would look up. We didn't know as much about clients, and a lot of our cold calls were on the phone, yes, but also a lot of our cold calls were knocking on doors.
Right.
So, and I have to admit that back then, um, it to a certain extent, I think it was a little bit easier to get someone's attention because there was less noise.
Yeah.
And we were also, anecdotally, we were selling something that was telecom had just deregulated in Canada, so you could offer long distance services to businesses, and they'd save a ton of money. So they were, hook, line, and sinker. You'd say, "Hey, how much are you spending on your long distances?" And then you'd say, "I can save you 50%." Their eyes would bulge out of their head. People back then, Fab, would spend $10,000 a month on phone calls
Hey, gosh, that's
because
crazy.
they dealt with Europe. Anyway, sorry, a little anecdote.
Yeah.
All that to say that you're right, that the tools are not the only thing that brings the success. You have to have the habits, but when you've got good tools, it really does help keep you
Yeah.
aligned with the proper habits.
Yeah, because then it's kind of like this black on white, like here, like here, what's going on here, and let's have a conversation about it. I think it's learning as a manager to use those tools, right?
Yeah,
Like is learning them to be what we just talked about, like
yeah,
making sure it's tying back to motivation and showing people how they're progressing and making it enjoyable and finding quick wins. Like it's all those are facilitated by the tools. So the more comfortable you get with it, um, the easier everything else we've talked about
yeah.
is.
Absolutely, 100%. So how do we wrap this one up, Fab?
I
What are
don't
our
know. I think
takeaways?
I don't
What
know.
are
My
takeaways?
biggest takeaway is you need to be, you know actively engaged as a partner, right, to your team and helping them achieve those goals and accepting that forming a new habit is not easy, especially when there's like it's difficult. Like, oh well, the last quarter was really bad. We need to do more prospecting, which is not something a lot of people enjoy, even if you're in sales. And so if you act as a partner and you're helping them helping them understand how it's tying back to what they're there for is useful, and then using the tools to help you do that.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and most adults understand that you have to connect the activity to the desired outcome.
Hmm.
And if there's no connection between activity and desired outcome, it ain't gonna happen.
Right.
If going to the gym just made you feel bad and you didn't lose any weight and you didn't feel better afterwards, no one would go to the gym. Then again, a lot of people smoke, and I don't know why. So maybe I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah. That's definitely another topic
Yes,
for another podcast.
yes. I have
um
to invite a psychologist, and I'm just talking about regular smoke because
yeah.
I understand the benefits of other smoking to some people. Uh
All
oh.
right, Paul, this
Bye,
is it.
everyone.
This is a good show. We'll talk to you soon. Bye,
Thanks.
everybody.
Talk to you soon. Bye.